All right, good morning to members of the public, media, to staff and councillors. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to be doing a little bit more in the Water Services Delivery Plan, and this is a bit of an update on what we've been working on and just to, I guess, help councillors and probably the community as well understand what's happening in the detail of things. And I might pass them straight over to you, John. Or would you like to?
I don't know. Pause.
Paul, did you want to do a quick intro? Pass to Paul.
Yes, so good morning. We've got a number of sessions arranged with a variety of speakers, just to bring you up to speed. Really just going to cover off mostly information that relates to issues that were raised in the feedback on the Water Service Delivery Plan. With that, really just pass across to Josh and Paul to run through the first two sessions.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure this morning to talk to you about some of our water, wastewater and stormwater compliance matters. This is something that we've had a little bit of additional oversight on over the past 12 months, as we are operating in an increasingly complex compliance environment. We've had some significant changes in legislation in the last couple of years, which has meant that a lot of the suppliers that we did have that would have been compliant were no longer compliant. And I suppose the key for me is that everyone understands where our gaps in compliance are and the need for further investment to ensure that we do meet the drinking water quality assurance rules, as well as the terms of our resource consents. As I said previously, we've had a number of sessions on compliance this year. For the new councillors, you probably won't be aware, so this is a great opportunity for you to get across some of these matters. We've had two briefings earlier on this year, one in particular on some of our abatement notices that we have in the wastewater space, then some issues on water compliance, and then we've had a PAR report that went, a report that went to our Performance Audit and Risk Committee on compliance matters and how we're doing in that space. As I've said earlier on, we're operating in an increasingly complex compliance environment. We've got the drinking water quality assurance rules that we need to meet, which are bound by the Water Services Act. We've got resource consents within the Resource Management Act. Within that, we've got take consents, how much water we can take from different suppliers and under what conditions, and then discharge consents for our wastewater sites and our stormwater sites, where we have consents for discharge to land, discharge to air, discharge to water, and that's for water and wastewater sites. Then we also have our mandatory reporting measures for DIA. These are the non-financial reporting measures. I'll touch on each of these as we proceed through, but when you look at this and you see, well, yep, RM reform's coming, that's probably going to change a little bit of what we're going to do in the consenting space. But as far as we can, we are just progressing as normal for now. The drinking water quality assurance rules last changed in 2022. There was a further minor update in 2024. I hear that Tom at Arroweye are shortly going to be consulting on further changes to how we have to report within networks, so our distribution systems. So it's a rapidly changing compliance environment. As was mentioned last week by Amy Adams, we currently have 8 boil water notices in place on registered suppliers. They're in council's name. Our village is one of them. We have just completed a water treatment plant installation there, so that will come off. It's just in the final stages of commissioning at the moment. Then we have a number of our rural suppliers. We've got Bushy Creek, Stoneburn, Awahokamo, Awamoko, Cowra Hill, Tokarahi, Livingston, and Windsor. We had a number of other suppliers that have since been connected to the Greater Oamaru Water Network. So over time, we have been trying to resolve some of the boil water notices that we do have, but we've still got a long way to go.
Can I just get you to speak up a wee touch there, Josh? Thank you.
We also have boil water notices in place on some of the camp water supplies. So as we're heading into the summer, it's important that for the supplies that aren't connected to Oda Matata, those would be Loch Laird, Parsons, that they do boil their water when they're at the sites.
Josh, those boil water notices, are they mandatory or they're just precautionary, as in to comply with the Act, as opposed to an actual offence or event happening?
So those are in place as permanent boil water notices because there is a high risk that there could be contamination at the sites. We undertake regular monitoring of the water supplies there, and from time to time, E. coli does come in, which could make people quite ill if they were to consume it. So people should be boiling water on those sites.
The answer is there could be, but there isn't yet.
At any point in time, there could be a contamination event on those sites. There have been a number of contamination events on those sites. We don't need to go and tell the public that there is a contamination event that's currently active at the moment because it's a permanent boil water notice. Yeah. So there have been many, many contamination events on all of those sites. It is important that people boil the water on those sites. Yep. Want to make that infinitely clear if I can. We also have a conserved water notice in place at the Ohau Village. The pipeline from the inlet works down to the treatment plant failed on the weekend, so that town is currently being trucked water into it to ensure that everyone has a supply.
Josh, could I just jump in here? How long have these boil water notices been in place on those supplies?
Years. Some of them for probably greater than a decade. I don't have exactly the timeframes on how long they've been in place, but they don't have any treatment barriers. So whenever it was decided that, the risk is now too great because there are zero treatment barriers on this supply, that boil notice would have been put in place. But many of them have never had treatment barriers. So it would have been when drinking water quality assurance rules came in, that it would have been required that a boil notice was put in place.
And just to follow up to that, was there any plan to put barrier protection in place?
Yes, yep. All of these suppliers currently have investment proposals in. So council's already decided it wants to invest and bring treatment up to scratch. Our project management office is going through the process of upgrading these supplies at the moment. Yep. These projects do take time though.
Just to be clear then, Josh, the answer to John's question is, in fact, these boil water notices are both generally precautionary, but episodically triggered by actual problems. So how frequent are those episodes where there has been contamination?
Quite frequent. I was looking at some of the test results for some of the supplies here on the Corridale schemes last night while I was preparing the presentation, and looking at how many of those sites have failed with E. coli results. And in the past 6 months, there were 3 or 4 fails there. So in those 3 or 4 samples that were occurred, there was E. coli that was present.
Just perhaps for the record, because it is a public workshop, my understanding is that we have been progressively working through the rural scheme since the Clark government essentially required upgrades more than a decade ago. And essentially what we have done is done those that have the largest number of consumers first. So would these schemes be those that are actually the smallest in terms of the numbers of people receiving water?
Not necessarily. Tokarahi Livingston is our 3rd largest scheme.
Sorry?
Tokarahi Livingston is our 3rd largest scheme by population. So following the population order, that should have been the 3rd one off the list, but that hasn't yet been done. It's probably unique in the fact that it's a rural supply and is quite long and disconnected. That it hasn't been a priority as yet. Yeah.
So I'm not defending anything, but just, those figures are great, Josh. As far as Windsor's concerned, I don't know if people are aware, but there's a shag colony about 3 or 4 k's up above the intake, and every time we get a freshen rain, it pumps all that up. So,
Yep.
we know it's there. We've just got to get there and fix it a bit quicker than we have been, would be my comment.
Yep, absolutely. And Stoneburn often has incidences like that. A number of the sites often do. First site, Oamaru. We were non-compliant in Oamaru. There was inadequate monitoring at the site. There was a sampling error, there was a missed sample, and we were non-compliant for the year. There was an issue where there was a failure either in testing or in courier pickup, and it didn't get to the lab in time, so the site was non-compliant. I know everyone's looking at this and going, well, someone didn't pick up a sample. Why does that really matter? It matters in the eyes of Taumata Arroway. It matters in the eyes of DIA. We need to have robust systems that ensure that all of the sampling requirements are met moving forward. Otherwise, we'll be litigated. And that goes through to everything from having the treatment barriers in place, having the infrastructure in place, as well as having the people undertaking the sample collection, as well as having the appropriate couriers and testing and so on and so forth. This is a systems problem. We need to up our game in all of the areas to be able to be compliant with the rules that are coming through. Waihemo. So a number of these non-compliances with respect to Taumata Arroway, but a number of them are also non-compliances with respect to resource consents that we have as well. So it's a little bit of a mixture. This one's a bit of a technical fail as well. We built a water treatment plant at Waihemo and the rules changed, and now we have to change the setup of the water treatment plant. The pumps are connected directly to the discharge side of the cartridge filtration, which isn't allowed. There needs to be a brake pressure tank before it's repumped. So there needs to be a minor change there to be able to make that site compliant again. Lower Waitaki, we've got increasing increasing nitrates at the site. We've got a longer term plan to connect it up to Waimuru, but that is going to take some time and quite a significant amount of investment to be able to extend a pipeline out through to Waimuru. And we still need to deal with some capacity constraints with Oamaru before we can do that. We are increasing the amount of monitoring that we're doing in Lower Waitaki to ensure that we don't put water that is above the MAV for nitrates into the system. But then there's a number of other issues there. The 4-log protozoa removal for the UV unit should have been resolved now. We put an additional meter in there to ensure that the validation kicks in, but we've still got issues with chlorine contact time. And then some other issues where we haven't been promoting the efficient use of water, which is a resource consent condition that we have. We haven't been undertaking active leak detection work. It's also a resource consent condition that we have. There's a number of these types of non-compliances that a lot of people would look at and think, oh, that doesn't really matter. But more and more there is scrutiny on resource consent conditions and our compliance to them. Since I've been in this role since February, I've been quite surprised by how much there is that we have to meet that is a stretch from what historically we had to meet. This is a very, very changing landscape. Tokarahi, as I said, we've got a boil water in place, but we're looking at putting acceptable solutions in on that supply at the moment, which is going through a cost benefit analysis to ensure that that is the right direction to go. Same as Aomoko. At Kuriel, we need to have filtration installed. We also need to do some work on the bore security there, which is a project that you guys have kindly funded for us and is underway. At Amarama, we have an interesting situation where the resource consent that we have in times of low flow on the Amarama stream only allows for take for households. So we have a technical non-compliance in our resource consent because we also supply businesses. So we've got to apply for a variation to the resource consent to ensure that industry can carry on in Amarama during low flows in the Amarama stream. Carra Hill, no protozoa barrier, no filtration, needs to be upgraded. Oda Matata also needs filtration required to meet the drinking water quality assurance rules. The other option there is we can increase the amount of monitoring we do there to try to make it meet level 3 requirements rather than level 2 requirements.
Josh,
Yes,
that first one, Takaraki,
yes.
the description into the non-compliance box doesn't make sense. No protozoa barrier, chlorination is in place, but a bacterial compliance reporting option, bracket, CT value, UV disinfection. What?
My-
Words missing. What does that mean to say?
Apologies, the cell looks to have closed up when I've copied it over. So CT value being chlorine contact time isn't in place. There is no UV disinfection, and therefore there isn't a legitimate bacterial compliance reporting option that meets the standards. Yep.
So it's the essence of that.
Yep.
Reporting. Okay, thanks.
So that is in the pipeline to be attended to with the likes of point of supply, yeah. So
Yep.
while they'll be waiting for an actual response from Mount Arrowai on what we can and can't do, we now have a pathway to fix that reasonably quickly.
Yep. We've got 18 months to meet compliance with the drinking water quality assurance rules according to Taumata Arrowai's compliance strategy. After that, it is litigation time. Yeah, so we've got quite a lot of work in front of us. How, as I've said, we're in the commissioning phase of the water treatment plant. We have resolved the chlorine dosing issues now, which is working out interruption of the supply, making sure that we've got backup generation for the times where there's a drop in electricity. Then we get to wastewater. We have 3 active abatement notices for the Waimadu wastewater scheme or the wastewater treatment plant. One of those criteria we're still not meeting. The other 2 we have now met. So essentially, our discharge into the environment wasn't within the parameters that it had to be within for our resource consent conditions. So we were potentially contaminating the environment, hence the abatement notice. We have upgraded aerators there. We've installed additional aerators. There has been a desludging project that's been undertaken to try to improve the capacity of the plant. This has been a journey of about 3 years to get to the point where we're almost compliant. It's just one item that we're not quite compliant on. Lots and lots of other councils have been litigated over these things well and truly before the 3-year period. If you look at the situation that Queenstown found themselves in with the Shotover Creek, there's a number of other councils that for very, very short periods, they've had an abatement notice in place and they've been taken to court and fined quite significantly over it. We've just been lucky to date that we haven't been targeted and been the target of that. There's been other people that, for whatever reason, politically, were preferable to fine.
Sorry, Josh. So just under Palmerston there, it says discharge of E. coli exceeded on wastewater. So what are we supposed to do with that? Because is that not what it is? It's a waste and we're purifying the water.
Yep. So that's essentially saying that the discharge that we had was too contaminated to discharge. Yeah, it wasn't treated well enough. Yeah. So in the water space, we've got a lot of upgrading work to do. In the wastewater space, we've also got a lot of upgrading work to do. This is one of those reasons that we look at it and say we need quite a lot of significant investment in the water space, and why some of the numbers that we look at are so high. We've got some significant challenges.
I just want to say I think Josh is doing him and the team a little bit of a disservice saying that it's by luck that we haven't been prosecuted. It's by hard work that the compliance team and Josh has been engaging with ORC for a very long time. And it's the confidence that they've been able to give ORC that we've got this problem and we're dealing with it, and the council's invested in it, that has kept them away from prosecuting us. So I think it's a bit more than luck. It's damn hard work.
Following on from that, just looking at that last one under Moeraki, what are the implications of the fact that ORC has not accepted our methodology for the calculation of nitrogen loading and also the other point about the breach of the resource consent with regard to the days irrigated per zone per week? Clearly, they haven't, okay, if they haven't accepted it, presumably that's indicating a further an additional response
Yes.
subsequently. So can you just flesh that out a wee bit for us, please?
Yeah. I suppose the point that I'm trying to get across on this is there's quite a lot of administrative non-compliances that we need to work through. We need to negotiate the methodology for calculating nitrogen with ORC because the method that they've provided us doesn't quite work with the infrastructure we have in place. We'd have to install additional monitoring equipment. We have, I think, got to a suitable conclusion where we both accept a calculation that's going to work for us, and we just need to update the way that calculation within our infrastructure data dashboard is done so that we'll be compliant with that item.
Are they being unhelpful then? I mean, if they're saying, here's how you have to test something, and we say, but hang on, we can't because we don't have the kit, aren't they, shouldn't they be saying, oh, well, okay, why don't you do it this way? Or
No. The consent that we had issued to us before we constructed the site. It's one of those situations where we probably cut off a few corners in the construction of the site to try to save some money, and we probably cut a corner that we probably shouldn't have in terms of not putting some infrastructure in place. We do our absolute best to keep the budget with the projects that we're doing, and when the budget's insufficient, sometimes you scale back on some of the items that may or may not be required, and in this instance, it was one that was. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. By the same token, the exceeding the days that are irrigated per zone per week. This is a situation where, according to what the landowners requested, we irrigate from 10 p.m. till 8 a.m. That crosses 2 days. So we're just in negotiations with ORC to say, yes, technically it's 2 days, but it's only one period in a given day. So it shouldn't count as 2 days. It shouldn't count as one. Because we're only able to irrigate certain fields a certain number of times because it's closer to the ocean. We're allowed to irrigate the other ones more often. And what's happening is because it's counting as 2 days, the fields that are closer to the ocean seem to be ticking over more often. Yeah, so we're breaching our consent in that respect. But ORC are agreeable, and we're just going to change some of the information so that we report correctly. A number of the wastewater plants up in the valley need additional consents, which we need to go through a process to get in place. For Currao and Ohau, first we need to do some pond drop tests to determine if the ponds themselves are leaking. If they are leaking, we then have to consent that leakage, but if not, we still need to go through a process and apply for land use discharge consent, discharge to air. And that's for Amarama and Oda Matata as well. So we've only just upgraded Amarama in terms of our discharge, but we now require an additional 2 consents than what we did 4 or 5 years ago. As I said before, we're rapidly changing landscape in terms of compliance. Lots of catch-up work that we need to do. For Duntroon, we've got a consent in place that expires in 2026. That was for a single septic tank that services, I believe it's 8 or 10 properties. That's no longer a permitted activity under the water plan. So we need to put in place some treatment and apply for a new consent for Duntroon for those 8 to 10 tanks. Again, it wasn't a problem 5 years ago. It became a problem because of some water plan changes.
Is there an estimated cost for that, Josh? Are there other ways of looking at it? What I'm thinking, there could be 10 or 12 houses affected, but it could be a horrific bill.
It possibly could be. We're looking at cheaper options. So we're looking at treating just the effluent from the septic tank as an option. the initial project costings that were put forward were to reticulate the entire town supply and install a wastewater treatment plant for the entire township. That isn't the direction that we're currently moving in at the moment. However, we need to engage with the community and see if they want us to put in a reticulated supply or not. That does come at a cost. Yeah. So the project could potentially get a lot bigger than just dealing with septic tank waste from 8 households. So other issues in the compliance space, not water and wastewater. We have a stormwater discharge consent for the Environment Canterbury area up the valley. That was put in place and we've had it for, I believe, 2-3 years. Yep. There was a whole lot of work that was required for us to meet the discharge consent that we haven't done as yet because we've been busy trying to deal with the water and wastewater issues. So we need to do some fairly in-depth analysis of our stormwater networks up there, do a lot of investigation work, come up with renewal plans, etc. We don't yet have a stormwater discharge consent for the Otago Regional Council area. That will be coming. I suppose the point of this is to say that stormwater, while we often forget it and don't invest in it, moving forward, that's not going to be a possibility. We'll need to start investing in it and treating it the same way we do water and wastewater. We also have high leakage, which was a concern of Amy and the panel that evaluated our water services delivery plan. In Cura, it's 48%. So roughly half of everything that we pump from the water treatment plant goes out of the pipes.
I'll just take a quick question.
Yep.
Sorry, you might get to this, Josh, but how accurate are those rates? Like, what's the methodology to
in Cura, it's pretty good because we have meters on all of the households. So that's probably the most accurate one of all of them. The rest of them, Paul can probably talk about the particular methodology, but they're all done at kind of a nighttime flow analysis, where we look at, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning type thing when people would usually not be using the water at all, how much is coming through that particular supply. Yeah, but Cura is quite accurate because we do have meters in place.
Brent.
Josh, I was just wondering, when was that last updated, that data as well? And I guess I'm asking, I know that Oda Matata is almost completely brand new now, so that seems quite high when we've just completed a whole heap of works.
Yeah. So this is the data from the last calendar year. So this is what's going to be in the annual report. Paul, did you want to get in specific?
Talked it briefly. So we calculate this once per financial year, so July through June. So these are the figures from July 24 through to June 2025. The challenge where properties aren't metered is that we know how much water we're producing. We can do a theoretical calculation, as Josh said, looking at maybe what an average household might be using at 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning, which is 2 litres per connection per hour. So we can work out the difference between what's produced and that theoretical calculation. What we don't know is where the loss is occurring. Is it occurring in our network? Is it occurring on private property? Is it running into people's bathrooms and toilets? We don't know, and that's one of the reasons that water metering does give you much better visibility in terms of where leakage is occurring.
Yeah, because I guess one of the comments on that, I know Oda Matata and Omarama, just the amount of watering overnight and those sorts of things that I would imagine that average is quite high. You don't have to wander around town much to see lots of water being unfortunately wasted as well at times.
Yeah, and that's an education piece that we need to get to. That coupled with volumetric metering often results in a steep decline in water usage, and our non-revenue water rate leakage rates tend to go down quite a lot. Historically, we didn't worry about leakage. It costs us more money to go and repair the pipes than it did to produce the water. So as a cost savings measure, we didn't care if the water came out of the system, providing there was enough pressure within the system and there was enough chlorine in there. There was very, very low risk of any contamination event. So we just put the water into the ground. That's obviously no longer permissible. It's another shift.
I was gonna say, there a risk where there's leaks, that there is that kind of backflow issue where other pressure will bring in other nice things into our pipes?
Yep. Yes, there is. Yep. If there's a negative pressure event, i.e. a pipe breaks, water from the ground can come in. It's one of the reasons that we have to maintain a chlorine residual within the system to be able to cope with any kind of an infection type instance like that. And it does present a risk. One of the things that Christchurch was pushing for when it wanted to go chlorine free was to have really, really low leakage rates to ensure that there was no chance of backflow into the system. Again, this is a change in how things have been done. I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is how much we've all paid to supply water services historically is shifting drastically. It's not just in compliance requirements, it's also changing how we have to maintain things, how we have to monitor things, how much investment we need to make in monitoring equipment, in staff, in resource, etc. It's not as simple as, oh, we always used to do it and it was fine then, so it's fine now, because the rules have changed. Yeah.
Can we just, going back to Paul's comments about the fact that in the majority of those cases, we have some reasonable level of doubt as to whether the leak is actually a leak or loss of water on a private property through a dripping tap or something of that nature. Am I right in assuming that although Oamaru, Marama, Rosa Matata, Palmerston are lower than Kurau, the Kurau figure, because it's predicated on metered supplies, is it reasonable to assume that it might be appropriate to transfer that level of leakage to the other systems on the basis that what you're actually getting from Kurau is much more reliable data? And a much, the fact that it's metered means that you can, to a greater extent than you have with the other suppliers, eliminate those unknowns or minimize those unknowns. Is that a reasonable assumption?
I would say that the process that we follow is the methodology that's required by DIA, and we wouldn't want to be changing from that process.
Yeah, I could also say you can't transfer data from one place to another accurately. Yes, it might give you an indication, but the methodology, we are not having accurate data on both the supply and the consumption side, is very vague. So every year we follow a methodology and come up with a number. Is that an accurate estimation of the leakage? No. But whatever way you look at it, the amount we're producing is higher than you'd expect the population to be using.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to let us off the hook or minimize the matter. I'm simply trying to say, should I be able to trust the Kurau data more than, say, Oamaru, because metering is giving you a more reliable basis on which to draw conclusions? That's really my question.
Okay.
Does the ground conditions are a very significant factor in this, that Kurau, because it is on essentially a riverbed,
Right.
The water drains away and there's pretty much no evidence of a leak, whereas in the coastal areas, I'm not sure about Marama and Otamatata, but certainly in Oamaru, if it is leaking, it's far more evident than in Kurau because it basically just drains straight away. Almost the best detection method is have a drought and look for the green parts.
Yeah.
In Kurau, are we or could we isolate different sublaterals to narrow it down?
Yes, we could. We've done quite a lot of work in leak detection over the past 6-8 months. All of the numbers here have gone down from the previous year. The only number that's gone up is Omarama. That went up by 3%, which I was not particularly happy with. This was a measure that I really wanted to meet for DIA reporting. So we've made quite a lot of investment in doing leak detection within all of these townships. In particular, Curragh, we found quite a lot of leaks. I would hope that the numbers you see next year will be significantly lower than what they are.
Was the Marama one that calculation error with the increase in population that caused it was an actual increase?
Yeah, actually, because it's a percentage, you're dividing by the total production. So perversely, if the total production goes down, your percentage goes up. So this was a case where the situation improved. We produced a lot less water last year than we had the year before, which is an indication that there was a lot less leakage. But because the number at the bottom decreased, the percentage actually went up in that instance. So we had some text describing that.
I know when we're talking about the LTP, we had spoken about Curragh being perhaps bringing forward, and I'm just checking where that landscape has changed around some smart metering and those sorts of things there. Is that still something we're looking at, or is that on? I'm just wondering where that was at and what those benefits might be around that, and using that as a model to perhaps reduce or produce more accurate numbers.
Yep, so certainly through the delivery plan, the funding for the metering was brought forward. I think it was all at the maybe year 8, year 9. It's come through over a few years early on, and our team is currently collecting information there. The challenge is, without having certainty in terms of where we're going with our water management, it's difficult to take the next step. So we're currently collecting information. But the next step kind of depends on where we land with our delivery plan.
Thank you. So that's about it from me in terms of compliance issues. The other things that I could talk about are high levels of inflow and infiltration within our wastewater system, leading to overflow events during storm events when that shouldn't be occurring. And there's a whole lot of work we need to do in the trade waste space as well, where we're accepting quite a lot of discharge from businesses that isn't being pre-treated accordingly. But that's, I just wanted to do a little bit of a quick overview of the current state of things for everyone who's new in the room, make sure everyone's across all of the challenges that we have in front of us. And I'll now hand over to Paul.
I'll just take a quick question from Dan first and then on to Paul.
Thanks for that, Josh. Really appreciate it. 18 months is the time frame we have to put all this right. Is that realistically achievable for us? And do you have a ballpark as to what it's likely to cost to get all of that done and compliant in that time?
So I may have misspoke earlier on. It's 18 months to meet everything we need to with respect to the drinking water quality assurance rules. We can meet it. It's going to take a concerted effort over the next 18 months. There should be sufficient funding within the submitted water services delivery plan. There were a couple of extra projects that were put in there that were different from the first or the second year of the LTP. So as long as those are carried over into the annual plan process, then we should have the funding that's required to meet it. And otherwise, us as officers just need to make the effort to get it done. Yeah, it will be a challenge. Absolutely.
Yeah, so just to sort of pick up on the point Josh made there, I mean, purpose of this was to sort of bring you up to date on where we are with compliance issues. It's not like these are all new or surprises. I think they were well discussed in the water service delivery plan in terms of being, I suppose, open and honest in terms of the challenges we were facing. And there were changes made to the budgets that were included in the delivery plan to make sure that council could address these issues in a timely manner. So it's not like, oh, this is a surprise, and we've been aware of this. the environment is changing rapidly, so when a change occurs, the team's been working very hard to come up with identifying the issues, specifying it, coming up with solutions to address it. And sort of when we submitted the plan, we believed, that we did have solutions in place for most of the items that have been raised. But some of them are, like leakage, infiltration, they are long-term solutions. But then I think which sort of leads well into the piece Paul's going to talk about in terms of, okay, there's a bunch of shorter term issues we need to address, and then there's longer term issues we need to address. But there was, I suppose, it's one thing to raise as an issue, but I think as you'll see from what Paul presents, it's like we weren't trying to ignore anything. And so, I suppose put that next piece in context.
Just Josh, just before we wrap it up, I didn't ask the question earlier, but I was mildly surprised to see that reference to the Lower Waitaki scheme and the nitrate levels being higher, 50% higher than the 11.3 figure. That seems to me to be a mirror image or similar to the issues that Waimate are encountering at Glenavian, and logically, given the topography and geography and proximity, that makes sense. What did you say we were going to do by way of, I think you identified an alternative supply, and if that's the case, how quickly will we actually be eliminating this nitrate issue by plugging the consumers into that alternative supply?
So the water team had historically planned to connect Lower Waitaki up to the Greater Oamaru Water Scheme. So they would be connected into Oamaru. That would require some capacity changes or some capacity upgrades within the Oamaru scheme to ensure that we had enough water to be able to deliver to Lower Waitaki. Currently working on potentially changing over the membranes that we have, which should yield greater capacity so that we would have enough to be able to deliver to Lower Waitaki. The project itself, if the nitrates became an issue, we'd rush it. But I think that the funding for that's probably out 2 years at the moment.
So you're saying the nitrate's not an issue at the moment?
Not yet, no. So what was found in Gore as well as in Waimate was the nitrates tend to come in waves. So it'll come up and then go down and then come up and then go down and so on and so forth. And at some point the wave just gets bigger and it triggers over the MAV. That's the reason that we've increased the frequency of monitoring, is so that we can catch the high points, so that we know kind of how much time we have to be able to deal with it. Nitrates are always an issue and we need to deal with it. It needs to be a priority. And we're working towards it. It's just the time frame that we have with all of these other non-compliances. You kind of can't do everything at once, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Josh, just a question, just what depth is that for Lower Waitaki? Because are there not some rules about what you can and can't do with bores and the water you take?
I couldn't tell you what depth those bores are. Apologies. I know the rules that we have now with the drinking water quality assurance rules, it's about whether it's a bore supply or it's a surface water supply. So it's based upon the source of the water as opposed to the depth of bores and so on and so forth. Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to the next stage of things.
It's just changing topic a little bit. This is just to update you on the condition data review that is underway. So just a little bit of background to start with. You'll all be aware that one of the principal conclusions in the assessment of our water service delivery plan is that the plan lacked sufficient information on our condition grading of our assets. And because of that, the IHAD didn't have the confidence in the delivery plan that followed. So we've been working quite a lot over the last month to progress this. Stage 1 is almost complete, which is a desktop review. And that was a scope of works that was pre-approved by the DIA. And then stage 2 would be moving into some limited physical testing to confirm some of the assumptions that have been made. And that's also a scope that I would plan to get reviewed before engaging the work. So the purpose of today is just to present some of the preliminary findings from the desktop study. We had a draft report in Friday afternoon. So I've tried today to pull together some of the findings and particularly compare them to what we thought we knew about our assets and any potential implications to the funding that's allocated in the delivery plan. So quite a few graphs. I'll try and talk through them as best as I can. And yeah, feel free to ask questions, but some of the questions may be addressed by slides later in the presentation. So first of all, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the condition data that we do have on our pipe networks, because we actually do have more than I think was reflected through the assessment. We know the installation dates, so the ages of our pipes. We know the materials of our pipes. We have base lives assigned to those. And that actually gives us everything we need to calculate a condition grade based on how far they are through their expected lifespan. In addition to that sort of spreadsheet type of data, we've also done physical condition assessments, primarily through CCTV of the wastewater and stormwater networks. So over the last 20 years or so, we've CCTV'd 53 kilometres of wastewater pipe, 8 kilometres of stormwater pipe, and also done some sort of electric current testing of our cast iron water mains coming from Ardgowan Dam down into town. And then coupled with that, we also have data on all the repairs that have been undertaken on pipes. So we've got information on failure rates, and from that we can infer as well how the condition is performing.
Paul, throwing that last slide, just a bit confused because it says we've got 1,600 odd kilometres of water falling main. Is that across the whole district as opposed to Oamaru?
No, sorry, the 1,600 kilometres is the total length of our drinking water network. And the 6 kilometres is the length from Ardgowan Dam down into town that has been assessed.
So that could be totally misleading if you didn't understand the numbers.
Yeah, possibly. I was trying to compare it with the 53 kilometres out of 203. But yeah, correct. So we've assessed the falling main from the dam into town.
Have we got any idea of any plans for that falling main, which I understand is quite old, and does it tie in with the Ardgowan Dam issue with the new dam regulations, and whether there's a better location for the pond and the pipe, perhaps reconfigure the whole thing? Has any thought been given to?
So in terms of the data from construction, we've got some very old drawings. With I guess the design criteria or characteristics specification for the pipe has been a little bit of guesswork because it was imported in the 1880s. In terms of how that ties in with the reservoir issues, it's probably going into a slightly different topic.
So this main basically comes from the treatment plant down into town. So we're not moving the treatment plant. So that rising main will still be used or would need an equivalent of it. It's not just from the dam.
Yeah, correct. So originally it took water from the dam, and then the treatment plant was constructed, and now water goes from the dam to the treatment plant up to the reservoirs and then down through the falling main, into town. So what have we been doing? We've engaged Project Max to do a condition assessment for us. Project Max are sort of experts in this field, and were sort of recommended as such by DIA. What they've done is to, as a starting point, review the data that we've supplied them. So that includes age, length, material, etc. that we've already talked about, and including the existing information we had on condition through the assessments and also the CCTV, etc. They've looked at the base lives or useful lives that we've applied to our pipes, and compared those to industry knowledge and best practice across New Zealand. They've worked to assign condition gradings to our pipes, either using the condition we had where we'd done CCTV, or refining what we'd done with their revised base lives. They've also identified some work to improve confidence in the condition gradings that they've come up with. Yes.
Just can those, the baselines and aging, can that be challenged at all, Paul? Because as we both know, there's some pieces of pipe that can be 100 years old that are perfect, and there's pieces that can be 20 years old that are actually completely worn out. So is that challengeable, or is that just an industry standard, I suppose, we've got to abide by?
Probably both. So there are industry standards, and both in terms of design lives, but also in terms of industry trends. How long are these types of pipes lasting across the country? And that's where the likes of Project Max, who have worked across the country and have databases from across the country, they're able to pull that data together. But ground conditions play a huge part in how pipes deteriorate. So there is a reflection that there might be local conditions that would favour a different life. We'll actually talk about that a little bit later in terms of the cast iron pipes. It's also an average. So an average base life, a base life of 100 years doesn't mean every pipe will fail on its 100th birthday, but it's an average. So we received a draft report, and just today want to compare some of the initial findings from that report with what we know about, or already knew about the pipes and how it's dealt with in the delivery plan.
That list of activities there all seems to me to be essentially people looking at numbers or doing something on the desktop. What I don't see there is we are going to actually put a camera into a pipe, or we're going to. There doesn't seem to be much. Have I got that right, Paul? There doesn't seem to be much actual physical investigation.
Correct. So the stage one was desktop. The fourth point there, identify work to improve confidence. That's that's stage two, which will be the physical investigations. So
effectively, these guys, the first thing they're doing is marking your essay, in a sense, to see if they think the numbers you've come up with and the calculations, the conclusions you've drawn are tenable and are endorsed by them. Is that
no? So they haven't marked our homework. What they've done is looked at our data and drawn their own conclusions.
Yes,
so they haven't looked at our delivery plan. They haven't looked at our water service delivery plan.
Right.
They've looked at our asset data.
Yes.
And drawn their own conclusions from that as to the condition of the pipes. And so what I've tried to do is take their view of our data, compare it to what we thought we knew, and draw my own conclusions about what that means to the delivery plan.
I guess, Jim, in the interim, what we're looking at is lining up our assumptions until we have that more in-depth data, which is going to be sort of closer to March. And so we need to probably have some processes that work alongside each other, because our timeframes are going to become very limited.
Well, I think we're saying the same thing in different ways. If anyone took my comment about marking our homework as being pejorative, it wasn't intended to be. I mean, essentially what you've done is they've looked at it and said, here's our assessment of what you've given us. You are now going to draw conclusions from that.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're correct. So I spoke about base lives. The detail isn't important here, but essentially the middle column is what we had in our database in terms of base lives. So a single figure for PVC, PE, cast iron pipes. We had a little bit of nuance in the AC pipes based on the size of the pipes. We'd assign different lives. That's due to the construction, the class of the pipes, but also the experiences we've been having in the field. So we've observed that the smaller diameter pipes have a lower lifespan than the larger diameter, and our asset base life had been adjusted to reflect that. Sorry. What Project Max has done is probably brought in a bit more industry knowledge, both in terms of the age of pipes and different manufacturing characteristics, different specifications of pipes, and also pulled in information from across the country. So recommending that we create categories of base lives depending on the age of some of our pipes. Cast iron moving away actually from assigning a base life and looking at the corrosion rates and what that does to the wall thickness, and also bringing in pressure. The higher the pressure, the greater chance of a pipe failing. So looking at the pressure under which an individual pipe is operating. That's on our pressure pipes. On our gravity pipes, they haven't given us a base life. They've put our data into their black box or their models, which are built up from data across the country, across decades of their research, and from that, using a probabilistic model, assigned a likely condition grade to our gravity pipes, which are the wastewater and stormwater pipes.
I'll just grab a quick question from Dan.
Yeah, I'm just looking at as far as the pipes are concerned, particularly pressure pipes. As far as rates of failure are concerned, which pipes tend to fail more often, and what sort of age are those? And relatively speaking, what percentage of our network of pipe work do those particular problem areas potentially make up?
Yeah, I probably can't give you all the numbers off the top of my head, but we have lots of failures in our small diameter, older generation PE and PVC pipes. We have had very few failures in the 150-year-old cast iron pipes. AC, more on the lower diameter, which is why we've got a lower life.
It's interesting because one of the concerns is that we have some of the oldest pipes in the country, and it seems that the 150-year-old ones are probably the most reliable.
Yes, so we'll come back to that in a bit more detail, but if we just looked at the age, we would be digging those up and replacing them right now, but that doesn't reflect the performance that we're observing. These three graphs, wastewater, stormwater, and water from left to right, each has two lines. The dotted line is the condition grade from 1 to 5 that we had in our database. And probably just worth noting that 1 is very good and 5 is almost at end of life. So the dotted lines are what we had in our database. The solid lines are what Project Max has evaluated based on the condition grading we gave them and their analysis of the life expectancy of the pipes. The main thing to note on this is that all of the graphs, there's been a slight shift to the right in terms of the percentage of pipes that are at a grade 5 and 4. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But just worth mentioning that the dotted lines weren't actually presented in our water service delivery plan. We didn't report the condition of, or the desktop condition of the pipes as a condition grade. We preferred to use the word condition for where we had actual data, which was the CCTV. And we talked in the text about understanding the condition of our pipe through their age, through their material, through their base life, and through failure rates.
A quick question on
Yeah.
that. Do you think if we had sort of put the information across it in a different way, that it might have been a different outcome?
I don't know. So in hindsight, where we said we had 0 in some instances condition data, we could have said 100%, because we had a number. Other condition plans will, where it's asked for the percentage of your network for which you know the condition, they've got a number, and then there's an asterisk which says based on age and material of pipe. So we didn't put a number, but we said we know our condition from the age and material of the pipes. So I don't know is the.
Did we get much feedback in that space before we had to put the plan in? Just recognising we worked alongside people to sort of group that together.
Pass.
So so we were asked to supply a draft version of the delivery plan to DA. Got feedback on it. This issue is not mentioned in the feedback. So if they'd raised it, we could have taken a different approach and included some of this information in the plan. It wasn't raised as an issue, so we thought the approach that was being taken was meeting their requirements. So that's why when it was raised in the letter at the end, it was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, Paul, pleading Fifth Amendment here. Consultants, and I assume project mix as well, are usually very conservative. Did they give in their report any percentages as in terms of confidence on their actual assessment?
Yes, so they've actually, for every condition grade, they've assigned a confidence rating to it. And essentially two confidence grades. They've applied a confidence rating of B to everywhere we've had actual data, and D to everywhere it's a base life. So, and the vast majority are based on a revised base life. So it's a low level of confidence grading, condition grading.
Just to get my head around what I'm looking at. So the percentage of pipes according to the desktop assessment is that are in trouble is how much?
So you'd be looking at the number to the far right.
Yeah.
So water, I think the number was 9%, maybe 7% for stormwater, and it was sort of in the 8 to 9% across each of the waters was graded 5, and 5 is very poor, supposedly less than 3 years of life left in it.
So if you're looking on a percentage basis, it's not half as bad as what that graph actually initially tells you. It's something that you look at a repair maintenance issue, that if you had a system going in there, you could actually resolve that reasonably quickly.
So it's still a lot of work. And so what it also, this doesn't talk to operations and maintenance, except that the greater percentage of your network that's in the poor condition, the higher the chance that you will be getting leaks, and the more your operation and maintenance is going to cost you.
But in saying that, if you spent capex on your operational maintenance, then those leaks and everything would decrease. So therefore, your operating costs should go down by replacing those pouring into the pipe.
Correct. Yes.
It's interesting, do you find it interesting, Paul, that our own assessment, our in-house assessment initially, with the exception of the stormwater, where you've got, I think, about maybe 1 or perhaps 1.5% of the pipes at level 5, it's mildly surprising in my view that in both water and wastewater, we essentially gave ourselves a zero problem in terms of percentage of the network that was at level 5.
So it's worth noting that one of the reasons we didn't put these numbers in the water service delivery plan is because that we had very low confidence in them. They're based totally on the age of the pipes and how far they're through their life. Wastewater, all the condition grading, all the CCTV was telling us a lot of the pipes were very poor. So the dotted line up here is a curve that we haven't actually presented and we haven't actually used, but it was a number that was in our database and could be calculated just from the age and base life of the pipes.
I'm sorry, I got the impression that the dotted line was our initial one and the continuous line was Project Max's.
Well, that is correct, but we hadn't used and we hadn't presented the dotted line. Yeah. So I'll just go now into some figures which are copied from the Project Max report. This is looking at individual types of pipes and also the materials and condition grades assigned to those. So this first graph is just showing the wastewater rising mains. So that's the pipes leading out of wastewater pump stations. Project Max have identified everything in the 1 and 2 category, except for what are actually 3 pipes in the category 5, which are 2 in Omarama and 1 at Humber Street. And we haven't actually had a lot of failures on those. So potentially an issue, it's something for us to look into, but our knowledge of those pipes tells us it's probably not a 5. The gravity mains, this is where we knew we had an issue, particularly in the earthenware pipes and very old, the older concrete pipes, which make up the majority of the central part of Oamaru. A large part put in the sort of late 1920s, early 1930s, at the end of their assigned life, coming up 100 years. And through the CCTV that we've done, have been shown to have a very poor condition. So, yeah, quite a large number of pipes in the poor category, in the 4 and 5, but that actually reflects the picture that we had developed from the condition grading that we had done, and the position that is presented in the water services delivery plan. And worth noting that we already have a plan in place and funding in place to start replacing the oldest earthenware pipes. Yes.
So again, Paul, on those, that'll be it's been identified and you guys know about it. I'm thinking further ahead. So do those wastewater pipes also run in parallel with our drinking water supply pipes? So what I'm saying is, when we attack that, can we actually put other pipe in the ground to save going back and doing it twice, even if we've got to cap it and eventually hook it up together?
Yep. So this is a picture of our wastewater network. The image on the left is the age of the network, with red being the pre-1930s. And on the right is just showing the material. So the brown is the earthenware pipes and the pink is concrete. And you can see a very high level of correlation between the red, which is the oldest pipes, and the brown, which is the earthenware. To answer your question, yes, when we're doing the renewals, we want to be as efficient as possible and group as much in as we can if the timing of the renewals aligns. So if our cast iron, which I'll come to later, which in many cases is in the same streets as the earthenware pipes, if that was up for renewal now, then yes, you'd be wanting to do both potentially at the same time. But I think we've actually got quite a few more years of life left in the cast iron, so you'd be premature to start replacing it.
Just a quick question. around the asbestos pipe, because obviously that probably word tends to put caution on everyone's lips. Can you talk to us about any concerns around that, or how we kind of operate around that kind of space?
Yeah, I've got a slide on that a little bit later, so I'll
Okay,
answer
we'll
that when I
come
get
to
there.
that then. Just a quick question from France before we move on then.
I don't even know whether you can measure it, but have you actually measured wear and tear in there, or is most of the wear and tear on the outside of the pipes rather than the internal?
The wear and tear on the wastewater pipes?
On all of the pipes in general?
Yeah, so the gravity pipes are easier in that you can actually put a camera up them. So we haven't measured it as such, but we've got video footage, hours and hours of video footage if you are interested in having a look.
No, I'm really surprised. He's still my second heart.
But it is more difficult for the pressure pipes. And in many cases, you are just looking at a point on a very long pipe. So to get consistent, comprehensive data is actually very, very challenging.
Yeah. I take it the steel pipes is the easiest to measure.
Yes, and that's what we have done. Just on our stormwater, so this is the picture that Project Max have painted of the condition there. Yeah, we've, as I said, had some CCTV of our stormwater pipes, and we've done a bit more analysis of those since the delivery plan was presented. So the team's been working over the last few months, and the picture presented here is actually quite well reflective of what we're seeing in the CCTV, with some pipes being in quite poor condition and needing renewal. This is probably an area where we've probably slightly undercooked the investment required in the delivery plan on the stormwater pipes. And I expect that possibly through the next stage, which will be just confirming what the condition is, that a bit further investment might be required to replace some of those pipes.
So again, Paul, just where do we stand, legislation wise? The stormwater was left out of the system. Is it now front and centre with the other two? It's there and we must do it. Is that how it sits?
Yep, stormwater is in our delivery plan. And yes, I guess with the pipes, there's several issues. One is the conveyance of water, and the second is the disruption to the road surface or whatever else is above the pipe in the event of a collapse. So it's both about maintaining the conveyance, but also about protecting the road in many cases that's above it.
You guys have spoken a lot about CCTV and inspections and getting data from that. And we're also talking about how much losses that we've got. Checking measured flow,
Yes.
particularly in the stormwater and the wastewater space.
So we have in the water space quite a number of meters through the network, through which we can, when we do measure flow, and that helps us to keep track of the water that's going into particular zones, and does help with identification of leakage when flow into a zone increases.
That's where I was going.
Yeah. Okay. So just moving on to water. This is the picture painted of our water mains. If you look at the bottom of number 2, pretty hard to see, but there's a very small grey bar. That's our cast iron. So the condition assessment that we'd had done of those suggested maybe a 3, based on the electrical testing that we'd had done. Project Max's view is it's probably a 2. And these are the 150-year-old pipes that theoretically, if we were just basing on life, we'd be renewing immediately. What I'd just like to highlight that the next stage will include some testing to confirm these assumptions. They're big pipes, they're critical pipes, they're old pipes, and we want to make sure that the assumptions we're making are correct. There's in the grade 4, that blue bar is PE pipe. And for the majority that is older generation, small diameter PE, that we find right throughout our rural networks. So we've got kilometers and kilometers and kilometers. Looking at that bar, it's about 360 odd kilometers of smaller diameter PE, which we do know is failing. We are getting leakages. Our maintenance contractor is constantly doing repairs in these areas, and that's nearing the end of life. And there's also in condition 5 a big orange bar, which is our AC pipe. And I'll just zoom in a little bit on that, because this was of all the findings in the report, this was the one that actually surprised me the most and departed most from what I thought we knew about the network. So if we look at what's in condition 5, this is now looking at the AC pipes by diameter. And what you can see is that roughly half of it is 57 millimeter and 80 millimeter diameter AC. We know that's in poor condition, and we've been working to replace that in our networks. Quite a lot of effort on that over the last 4 or 5 years. And I thought we'd got rid of the majority of it, but most of what's shown there is actually in the Corriedale networks. So there's a backlog within the Corriedale networks of AC pipe that is theoretically towards the end of its useful life and will be up for renewal. The rest of that is 100, 150 millimeter diameter. And this is the case where the poor condition isn't reflected in the failure rates that we're getting. So this was the biggest surprise to me. And this will be an area in the stage 2. We will be doing some targeted investigations to confirm whether grade 5 is actually appropriate. And it might be that this is a case where our soil conditions are a bit more inert, or our water conditions are a bit more inert than elsewhere in the country. And actually we are a unique case. So we just need to get some confidence around that grading there.
So I'll take a couple of questions there. First of all, Sven, and then on to John.
Is the higher failure rate of the lower diameter pipe inherent in the fact it's lower diameter? Is it worth putting larger diameter pipe in for lower failure rates and future growth as well?
So it's to do with the diameter of the material. So if we're putting a new pipe in, we're not going to be replacing the same material. So that sort of question goes away. And yes, you do size it for the future. But it's sort of a characteristic of that material that as the pipe diameter increased, the strength of the pipe was also increasing.
Yeah, I know there are assumptions, Paul. I'd say that 53K in Corriedale is actually probably nowhere near that, but I can see where the figures come from, because in a lot of cases out there, those the AC pipes are running parallel with the new pipe, and until such time as they give trouble, they're using both of them in conjunction. So the renewals are already sitting there, but they're being used in conjunction with what's there. My other question would be, with the smaller delivery pipes, especially in an urban scenario, if we started putting meters on and working back to those supply lines, would that solve a lot of this problem of the small diameter pipe and make it more reliable?
Yeah, so in the urban setting, we don't actually have much of the small diameter. Most of the urban setting is designed for firefighting, and most of the pipes are larger to accommodate fire flows. So smaller diameter generally is in our rural networks.
I was a bit surprised when you said that there's a lot of failures in the poly pipe. My experience is very good. I'm just gonna refer to Councillor McCone there, because there's polypipe and there's polypipe. Are you referring to the old type? And I forgot the name of it, John, you probably can remember.
Yep. But just to give you an indication, if you look at the PVC and PE on this, so pre-1986, industry is sort of 50-year lifespan for the pipes. More modern pipes, they're assigning 100-year life. So it's to do with the materials and the changes in specifications and construction technology over that time.
Yeah, so the modern polypipe these days
Yes.
is a heck of a lot better.
Yes.
than
Yeah,
what's
correct.
been put in the ground so
Correct.
many years, because although you might all refer it to polypipe, there is a difference between those two, significant difference.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's not actually the same material.
no, correct. Thank you.
I guess just while on this slide, I'll come back to the question on asbestos cement pipes. So the pipe is conveying water, and there's no evidence that the asbestos in the pipe is a health risk for those consuming water from the pipes. When we replace the pipes, we have a policy to leave those in the ground, because the removal of the pipe is actually a greater health risk than leaving it in the ground where it is protected. And finally, this is just again zooming in on Oamaru, just because that's the oldest network. Looking at a water network again by age, with red being the pre-1900 cast iron pipes on the left, and what's on the right just shows the material types. The kind of maroony color, which isn't very easy to see there, is the cast iron. So that's a large part of what's in the central part of town. Orange is the AC pipe. So you can sort of see from this graph on the right how the town actually developed from the original part of town, which was cast iron, expanding into AC, and then more recently into PVC and PE pipes. Yep.
Another question. So this is all a falling main, isn't it? That's supplied from the reservoir for this whole supply. And on that basis, if we renewed, say, the north end, do we have to do the balancing act of the south end to make sure that we don't upset the water flows, or do we have enough height to actually do that logically?
So in terms of pressure, which is where the height comes in, the elevation, obviously, top of Reservoir Road is a lot higher than most of town. So we have the pressure there. Oamaru is divided into a number of zones. So actually there's zone valves sitting between the north end and the central part of town. So you could open them and they'd all be, you would get that balancing effect, but they're managed as different zones. We also have pumps within the network. So where the elevation difference won't allow you to have the pressure at the delivery point, there are pumps. So there's a pump at King George Park to get water up into South Hill Reservoir, from where South Hill down towards Kakanui is gravity fed. So it's a combination of making use of elevation where you can, and then pumping where you need to boost up the pressure.
So I suppose what I was trying to ask is, it doesn't matter where we start, because we have the ability to still supply water to the rest of the network, regardless whether we upgrade the reticulation.
Correct.
Paul, just recognising we are stopping you constantly. I'm having a look at the timetable
Yeah.
with the Stu Cross from Morrison Low sort of coming on board nowish. Are we best to park this and go on to that? Or I'm just probably looking for where you guys think it might be best to proceed.
I'm happy to park. I've got just a couple more slides on this, but they might have generate a bit more discussion. So it's
Yeah, I think if Paul can get on to the next couple of slides, and even just talk about them, and then people can have a think about them while Stu's talking, because, yeah, I think if it just outline what they are, and then we can come back to it if we need it, because I think they're actually in terms of impact and particularly the financial impact, I think they're actually very interesting. So if you just sort of flash them up, explain them quickly, and then we'll have a pause, I think that would work pretty well.
Thanks, Paul. We'll proceed on that.
Okay, so what I've tried to do here is look back at our water service delivery plan, what was presented there, and try and assess what difference does this information that we've got from Project Max make to how we view the world, and does it make any difference to the funding that we'd allocated to these activities in the delivery plan? So these graphs come straight out of the delivery plan. I have modified them a little bit to show the materials that make up the water, wastewater, and stormwater pipes. So this is the water renewals. The bars are the theoretical year in which a pipe needs to be replaced based on its age and the amount that needs to be spent to replace them. The solid line is the funding that was allocated to renewals in the delivery plan. So what you'll see at the front of the delivery plan is the orange cast iron pipes. They were all up for renewal based on age. If the condition is as we thought it was, and as Project Max has confirmed it probably is, none of that work needs doing up front.
This is what?
All the orange
Yes.
doesn't need doing up front if our assumptions on the condition of the cast iron mains are correct. So if you pull that out, then that leaves a lot of space to do extra work, because we know that potentially the condition of the AC is worse than the age of the pipes indicated. Potentially some of the small diameter PE needs to come forward. So my conclusion from this, and it's just my conclusion, is that the level of investment in the delivery plan is adequate for our network and for the new information we have on the condition. Bearing in mind it's subject to some field testing. This one is the wastewater. Once again, my takeaway from this is that the level of investment indicated over the next 10 years is reasonable. Project Max has confirmed what we already knew about the condition of the earthenware pipes, and we'd budgeted to replace those. And then finally, the stormwater. Possibly this is just the one where there might be some additional investment required there if the condition is as poor, and if there is many poor condition pipes as Project Max has indicated. But the scale of spend on the stormwater is a lot less than the scale of spend on water and wastewater, just by virtue of the smaller networks. So maybe that's a good place to stop and let you mull over that. And I've got a couple more I can present later.
All right, we'll move on to Stu. Are you online there?
2 seconds. Yes, I am online.
Welcome. I'll pass over to you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I'll share a presentation. Which one is it? Yeah. Bit of lag. Okay. So I've just been asked to present a bit of a comparison of options that are available for you for delivery of your water services delivery plan, or for the future delivery. I'm going to warn you, I guess, in advance that while I have got some information available around things like price and debt profiles and bits and pieces. I'm not going to get into that level of detail today because I'm focusing on that high level comparison of the options that are available. And I think it's probably just worth noting a couple of headlines around that in terms of the financial perspective. So the first one being that Southern Waters modelling, while there was some done that included Waitaki, that was done prior to us finalising your last water services delivery plan and making the changes that were made through that process. So any data I could share on the Southern Waters side wouldn't reflect your latest information. And similarly for Timaru, no modelling's been done as far as I'm aware of just the Timaru Waitaki entity at all. And we haven't wanted to start that work without you guys having a clear direction about what you want to do there, because obviously we don't want to incur costs that you don't need to incur. I also would just note that all of the models that we are seeing across the country, I'm not aware of a single model in the country which does not have local prices in it. So while the labour reform direction typically had what I call price harmonisation, some people call cross-subsidisation, but effectively a single price across the service area of the water entity. We're not seeing that in any of the entities that are coming out of the local water done well process. So what that means is if we are looking at joint models, the amount of money that your ratepayers pay for their water will be pretty similar under any joint model that you have, because you'll just be paying the costs that relate to Waitaki to providing water in Waitaki. And similarly, the amount of debt that you repay under any joint model, we would expect to be broadly the same under any joint model. Obviously, there would be some efficiencies, but estimating what efficiencies are going to be for an entity that doesn't exist right now is really crystal ball gazing. So we can put a bit of science on it, we can do some benchmarking, but we actually don't know exactly how much efficiencies are going to be achieved under any model with any degree of certainty. And certainly the two models that I'm going to be talking about today, a Timaru Waitaki model and a Southern Waters model, are of similar enough scale that I wouldn't want to be suggesting that one was likely to be more efficient than another. So those are just kind of caveats, I guess, before we get into it. So my main focus today is actually just take us through some of those strategic position differences and some of the key differences in terms of what an entity might look like under these different options. And I haven't put your one up here. You guys understand your current strategic position well enough, is that you've submitted a water services delivery plan on an in-house model. That delivery plan has been rejected by DIA, and obviously that's why we're in the position we're in right now. But just to compare, I guess, from a really strategic perspective, the differences between a South Canterbury grouping and Southern Waters. I've referred to it as a South Canterbury grouping, but Waimati have already had their plan accepted, and that includes an in-house delivery model. And our experience with Waimati in the earlier stuff is it's very unlikely they're going to be persuaded to join any entity now that they have approval of an in-house model themselves. We don't know the fate of Mackenzie District Council, but I would anticipate most likely that the review of their plan is going to go favourably for Mackenzie. So what we're really talking about with South Canterbury is a pairing with Timaru District Council. And a couple of key things to consider when we're looking at that one is their water services delivery plan refers to new member discussions taking place up until the 31st of March 2026. So this is, I guess, talking about the pace that we might need to work to make any decisions there. And it's also just worth noting that their plan is actually for water and wastewater only in their CCO. So they are retaining stormwater services in-house. Waitaki will have their own views about whether you want to transfer those. And I guess there is no reason you couldn't have a water entity that does water and wastewater just for one council and all three waters for another. But it's just, I guess, a point of negotiation as you work through that process as well. And then finally, it's just worth noting, obviously, there's been no decisions yet regarding anything to do with the governance arrangements, ownership, pricing, or actual analysis around the Waitaki Timaru model. On the Southern Waters side, we are probably working to similar timeframes as Timaru. So working with that group myself, I would suggest that ideally we would want decisions by the end of March as well. But that door could be held open probably for a little bit longer, depending on how those conversations were going, I would suggest. And that's obviously just a technical advisor's perspective. The mayors and the CEOs of those respective councils will have their own views around that as well. It does cover all three waters, and at the moment their plan has also been accepted. So those three councils are going to be in that model regardless of whether you guys join it. It's worth noting that plan did include some pre-approval for Waitaki to join. It also included some pre-approval for Timaru to join. And I think, one thing to note, I guess, is the next step that we take as a council, or that Waitaki takes as a council, is probably not the last step in the journey for water reform. So I think across the sector, there is expectations that the entities that have been set up today and over the next couple of years are only going to grow and continue to start joining over time. It is, worth noting that the analysis that there has been some analysis done. It is out of date though, but it's largely complete so far, and there is a whole pile of agreement that's been made around the governance structure. These are all of the decisions so far that have been made around that governance structure are aligned with what was agreed with when Waitaki were part of that conversation. So there hasn't been a significant departure from the decisions that were agreed when Waitaki were also part of those conversations. Just again, a little bit of that comparative analysis across the three options that are available to you. And I'll just point out some of the key ones here. The first one, I guess, is that most of your regulators are going to be the same, with the exception that at the moment, you deal with two regional councils. Timaru and Waitaki as a joint entity would deal with those same two regional councils. And Southern Waters would add a third regional council to their regulatory group that they were working with. That's obviously subject to any announcements that are floating through the rumour mill at the moment around regional councils, which we won't know anything about until those rumours are proven either true or false. The rural water governance and operation, at the moment, you have separate charges and you've got Corriedale water management contract. Timaru and Waitaki, we don't know, again, I guess, what that rural water governance and operation would look like. But we do know that Downland's scheme is a significant rural water scheme that does provide drinking water as well. And that has a joint standing committee but also worth recognising that also covers multiple districts. So it's got representatives from Mackenzie and I think maybe Waimate or yourselves as well on the standing committee there. So a little bit interesting if you don't have Mackenzie also joining, but not unmanageable, I wouldn't have thought. Southern Waters have got some agreed principles around this. So there's some ring fence charging. There is rural representation at probably the shareholders representative group level. And they will have specific expectations laid out in the statement of expectations to that water entity. So there's a bit of recognition that rural water is important to this group. Similarly, I think it's worth noting, I guess, the key differences around some of these things that we actually don't know the answer to yet, but will need to be worked through with Timaru. And that's, Southern Waters at the moment has equal voting shares agreed and equal representation at the shareholders representative group. We don't know, again, what Timaru would ask for or require through that negotiation process, but it is worth noting that Timaru is larger than Waitaki by almost every metric that we would measure shareholding on typically, other than giving equal shareholding. Similarly, cost sharing, we can assume that most likely a Timaru Waitaki model would include some ring fencing because that's consistent with the national picture. And as I mentioned at the start, the share of debt that's going to be funded by you under any of those models is going to be the same, most likely, again, subject to negotiation with Timaru. A little bit kind of, I guess, more financial numbery kind of comparisons here. Again, I guess worth noting how you might compare to the partners that you would work with. Through a Southern Waters arrangement, you guys sit at about contributing around between a quarter and a third of almost everything. So you contribute about a quarter or a third of the geography, of the number of connections, of the asset value, of the debt, and of the total revenue that would come into Southern Waters based on the information that we have to hand. On the other hand, you contribute only about a similar proportion in a Timaru Waitaki model. So again, around between a quarter and a third of connections, debt, asset value, and total revenue. But you contribute 72% of the geographic area of the future entity there. Worth noting, while on the Southern Waters model, you're around a quarter to a third, there are actually 4 councils in that model. There would only be 2 in the Timaru model. So, proportional to your other partners, you would be significantly smaller compared. You would be the small fish in the relatively small pond with Timaru and Waitaki, and you would be closer to the big fish in the still small pond in the Southern Waters model. And then I've just kind of put a bit of alignment there around that kind of population density. Timaru itself is significantly more dense than Waitaki. It's around 18 people per square kilometre. Southern Waters is pretty consistent with Waitaki in terms of its population density, which is probably a pretty good signal for the alignment of the communities in terms of that rural provincial kind of feel there. The only other thing I just wanted to talk to here at this point, and I touched on that right at the start, is that the scale of those efficiencies and the local prices that would be experienced by Waitaki are likely to be similar under all of those joint models, or under both of those 2 joint models anyhow. In a perfect world, we would have a joint model that also included Timaru and Southern Waters, and then we might be starting to talk about a step up in the level of efficiencies that we might be able to achieve. I think, while I don't think that's impossible outcome, I think that's quite a few years away at this stage. And then I just wanted to finally just touch on some information that looks kind of familiar to some of you who would have seen an Infometrics presentation that would have been pulled together under the Southern Waters work. So those councillors that were there at that time, I just wanted to demonstrate that I think under any of these models, the buying power and the scale that you will have under a joint model is significantly higher than what it would be on your own. So you can see this is the list of future water entities across the South Island, although noting that Southern Waters and Timaru are in here twice because I've got the models that would include Waitaki. And Waitaki District Council here would be the 4th smallest water entity in the South Island if you stayed in-house for an in-house delivery model, just based on the population that's served by that reside in your district. A model that includes either Southern Waters and yourselves or Timaru and yourselves would put you as the 4th largest water entity in the South Island. And you can imagine that in a market that we are coming into, where we have significant requirements placed on councils to upgrade their water schemes, to upgrade their wastewater schemes, and we have a market that is constrained in terms of the available skills in the water sector. Competition for capital works and for contractors is going to be really high. So having that increased buying power, I think it would be fair to say is highly likely to result in cheaper prices through that contracting arrangement that you possibly could explore. That's actually all of the information I wanted to present kind of at a comparative level to you. Like I say, I am available for some questions around more detailed information with the caveats that I didn't want to put them in the slides because of those caveats at the start, that the detailed analysis itself has not been completed for Timaru and Waitaki particularly.
Thank you, Stu. Appreciate it. And I think it's just probably a really good grounding. I'm not sure if there's any questions to that. We are due for morning tea, but we might just take a few questions before we move into that space. So I'll start with John and then move on to Jim.
Thank you, Stu. If I wasn't confused, I'm totally confused now. I have a question though. All those figures, we've seen them before and nothing seems to have changed. And I take what you said about how they've come to. Do we have a figure though, actually, of what the cost is? So if we kept it in-house, bearing in mind we don't have to set anything else up, we keep in one scenario for an annual cost, or a CCO that we own and then have a cost with that, bearing in mind there are stranded overheads in that department, and a CCO that is a joint CCO with the same conditions as a stranded cost. One, on the basis of the cost of setting those up, and two, the annual cost of running that, and what benefits as against the benefits we get out of that.
Right. So, like I say, I guess at this stage, I can certainly talk to the cost of setting something up. And Southern Waters at the moment are operating on a roughly $8 to $9 million transition budget. That includes a significant amount of IT costs within that budget. I don't anticipate that those costs would grow significantly with another council joining. As you can imagine, there's sort of like a base layer of these are the costs relating to just setting something up. And then they only grow at certain points because the actual work that you need to do to set up a water entity is broadly the same across all of the options that you have. I've presented in the past that the modelling that we have around the efficiencies that are driven from the capital structure or the debt that we borrow, as well as the efficiencies that we would anticipate based on kind of industry benchmarks and industry research, more than pay for that transition cost within 5 to 10 years maximum. So that cost is repaid pretty quickly, and as would be the impact of any stranded costs there. I don't want to, like I say, I don't really want to present like it's going to be $2,500 kind of piece of information to you under any of the models, because none of them have been updated for your latest water service delivery plan data. And as we've heard from Paul, there might also be opportunities where we need to reconsider again some of those costs anyhow in the water service delivery plan. So it would be a bit premature to start presenting numbers. I know how people like to jump on numbers when I give them to them. So try not to give you too many numbers too early.
No, look, appreciate that and understand where you're coming from, but I suppose the part of the question still I would like answered, does that setup cost include the stranded overheads that each district council will be facing?
So the stranded overheads would be an annual impact. Again, those haven't been assessed in detail because it's not quite as simple as just saying this is the amount of overheads that you have. Just stop my share. It's not as simple as saying this is the amount of overheads that you have funded, because some of those overheads would be released. So that is a separate piece of work, but at a high level, you are correct that there would be a level of stranded overheads that your ratepayers would potentially be carrying just based on the current numbers. I can say that looking at the earlier work we did, that would be in the range of about $200 per ratepayer, but that's without factoring in any potential savings you have to reduce those stranded overheads. So that is purely just based on this is how much is funded by council at the moment, and this is how much it will no longer be funded by water activities in the future. That doesn't mean it's the same as the actual costs that are stranded in council. And like I say, that would require a detailed piece of work with council, going through org structure, figuring out whether it is the fit, whether your future design is actually fit for delivering your future services, which is not a piece of work that has been done as part of the water work.
Sorry, can I just add to that as well? I mean, our working assumption. So one of the KPIs the last council set for me was around an organisational strategy. So what does the organisation look like post-transformation, post-waters? And so our working assumption was within that, we would be working out those stranded overheads from the organisation. Now, until we know what they look like, I don't know whether that's possible or what time frame we could do that in, but that was going to be our objective to do that if waters was transferred out of the organisation.
I think
It's
also
fair
just
to say
worth,
there's, sorry, I was gonna say, it's fair to say there's a fair bit at play at the moment that, you know, we're just gonna have to play a wee bit of a wait and see, and I think this picture will become a bit clearer in the next wee while. Stuart, I will just pass on to Jim for a question before we carry on.
Very quickly, Stu, that graph you showed us with the, I think, 2 or 3 back from the last one, one of them indicated that we had about $44 million worth of debt funding or loan requirements on a standalone basis. And the figures for the Southern Water, and I know the figures for Timaru as well, but I think they were more conditional or qualified. But I think you've indicated that SW, Southern Waters Consortium, would have 211 million of debt, of which we had 21%. And I worked the calculation out on my phone, and I think it worked out more or less an equivalent amount. But am I right in my recollection of, with respect of the legislation, that the borrowing terms for entities of a combined nature are going to be more palatable or more acceptable than those that might be available through LGFA to standalone entities? And am I also right in recollecting that the borrowing timeframe allowable for the new entities is longer than that's normally provided for councils?
I'm going to try and address this in 2 parts, I think. So the first one is about the favourable terms. What I'll say about that is, I think when Local Waters Done Well was announced, there was a lot of positive messaging from the current government that it would allow people to borrow more and cheaper. When you unpick that, I don't think that that's necessarily reflected in the reality of how these are funded. So certainly the way that it would borrow would be and manage its capital structure is quite a difference to how councils do it at the moment, but that doesn't necessarily mean access to more borrowing and not necessarily cheaper. So the latest from the local government funding agency on that is that in their term sheets, they are saying that the cost of your borrowing will be roughly based on the weighted average borrowing cost of each of the councils that are part of it. So if you are partnering, I guess what that means is if you are partnering with councils that have a very good credit rating and therefore have a very good interest rate, then yes, the entity will be able to borrow less than the councils that potentially have a poor credit rating or no credit rating, as your case may be at the moment. But I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a significant benefit from the structure. On the second point around the term of the borrowings, the legislation has enabled longer term debt to be acquired. I believe that is actually available to both councils and new entities. But again, I guess there's a caution to that is, I don't know that comes at a good price. Buying 30-year debt typically is more expensive than buying short-term debt because effectively the credit market is taking the risk around the interest rates on that one. So while it may be an option, I'm not necessarily convinced it's an option that many are going to be choosing to take up.
Quickly, a supplementary, there was also, and I forget the term, but there's the entities I think are allowed to they have to hold some cash to the tune of, I think, about 4%, whereas a standalone council operation has to have an equivalent sum amounting to 10 or 12%. And Paul, can you remember the term, the particular?
I suspect you're referring to the FFO to debt ratio, Councillor Hopkins, and that is a little bit complicated as well. Just to get into a lot of detail. So the larger you are as an entity, the lower the FFO ratio is that you need to conform with, which is a good thing. So the lowest that goes down to is 8% for the largest of the entities that'll be grouped together. And the highest that goes up to is 12% for a CCO, the smallest of the CCOs. So if you were doing your own CCO without partnering, you would certainly be accessing that lowest of the FFO rates that is available. I think all of these groupings would most likely fall around the 9% FFO rate. And again, you can see the number that's set based on the number of connections and the number of connections between Timaru and Waitaki and the Southern Waters model. Both of those are under 50,000, which is one of the key thresholds that we'd be looking at there. A council for an in-house model doesn't have to conform with any FFO ratio. It deals with its own debt covenants, which are debt to revenue ratios. And at the moment, yours, I think, imposed by your lender would be 175%.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there now. So thank you online, Stu, and for everyone here. We will stop now for morning tea, and yeah, thank you for everyone at home that's watching as well.